Hello and welcome to Obscure Movie Reviews, where we love to take a look at some of the more unknown and ambiguous titles in cinema history. Here we focus on movies that are hard to find, on the older side, relatively unknown, or perhaps they simply lack in popularity. So rev your engines and trim your fur as we explore the creepy crawly world of Scooby Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf. When a local Transylvanian werewolf retires, monster master Count Dracula must rush to find a replacement for him so he can have a full roster in the annual Monster Road Rally. Fortunately, a prophecy points him to a candidate that is destined to become a werewolf. That candidate is none other than Shaggy, who is apparently quite the race car driver already. But when the prophecy is fulfilled and Shaggy becomes a werewolf, he and his friends are horrified by the prospect. However, Dracula promises that he'll change Shaggy back to normal if he wins the Monster Road Rally, to which he reluctantly accepts. While this movie has garnered a cult following in recent years, it spent a lot of time as one of the lesser-known Scooby-Doo movies, and that's not very surprising. This was the last Scooby-Doo film released in the 20th century, and aside from the characters of Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy, it bears almost no resemblance to any other Scooby-Doo property. There's no mystery to solve, the monsters are all real, and Fred, Daphne, and Velma are entirely absent. Shaggy actually seems much more grown up in this movie, not being a coward but actually quite bold at times. Really seems to have his act together. He also has a girlfriend, Googie, who just inexplicably adores him. The only real characters to maintain their personalities are Scooby and Scrappy. So how does this one compare to some other animated properties that came out at that time? Bearing in mind that it's an animated film intended for children, one can look at it through that lens. There's a lot of famous voice talents at work here, and they all do the job that they set out to do. Don Messick and Casey Kasem reprise their roles as Scooby and Shaggy, respectively, and bring their general good talent to the mix. Hamilton Camp brings a life to Dracula that's as classic as it is over the top.
Stop that, you sniveling little cape kisser!
Jim Cummings, Alan Oppenheimer, Rob Paulsen, and Frank Welker, all famous voice actors, find their voices floating around multiple characters in this one.
That's right!
No one in it is terrible, but I'm not sure that they're all bringing their A-game either. I've definitely heard much, much worse. If one doesn't enjoy this movie, it won't likely be because of the performances, so it'll get a 6 out of 10 for having above average acting. Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf was a made-for-TV movie with a runtime of 1 hour and 32 minutes. This means that when it was released in 1988, that it was meant to fill a 2-hour time slot. If you watch it on home video, the commercial breaks are clear, and the story is relatively fast-paced despite the actual ending race taking up almost half of the film. I can imagine that the pacing was actually better when there were commercial breaks. It feels very much like a long episode of a Saturday morning cartoon, or something that could have been a multi-part story for a daily cartoon run. I do feel that there are certain elements that simply take too long, like the aforementioned race, or the hunchbacks attempting to get Shaggy into the moonlight, but the antics are humorous enough to keep a kid's attention. As an adult watching this movie, it's a little harder to sit through. Overall, the movie will score a 5 out of 10 for having average pacing. This is a little bit of a weak spot for the movie. While Hanna-Barbera cartoons have never been known for stunning imagery, they do have a unique style that's all their own, and are pretty readily recognizable. This movie floats away from that style quite a bit. This is mostly due to the fact that it was digitally colored. The technological limitations of digital coloring at that time are quite clear, because the entire color palette comes out a little flat. Also, the characters don't feel at all like they inhabit the world they live in, as the color palette for the characters and the elements they interact with are very different from the scenery. This is sort of common in cartoons, but it's especially noticeable in this one. Lastly, the animation itself actually feels like a bit of a downgrade from a lot of other properties coming out at that time. Overall, the cinematography will get a 3 out of 10 for not being very good. The soundtrack is actually one of the highlights of the movie in terms of musical score. It's simple enough, but the music is really on point here. While it doesn't ever have the classic Scooby Doo theme song, and therefore it doesn't have much of a Scooby Doo vibe that the fans have become familiar with, the music had its own unique and creepy flair, especially the brooding main theme. The music often matches the tone of the scene well. The sound effects are mostly good choices.
Boy, Scoob, like this car is weird.
But the audio quality on the vocal recording sounds a little off. This coming from a guy whose own audio recording is hardly top-notch, I know, but the vocal track just isn't very clean at times, only really being saved by the musical score, so it'll get a 5 out of 10 for having an average soundtrack. The story is bizarre, even for a kids' movie. The audience is given no explanation for why Shaggy and the two dogs are away from the regular gang, and why Shaggy has such a dramatic shift in character. Shaggy is apparently a very successful amateur race car driver, though the rules of such a race seem to be non-existent as just about anything goes, similar to the wacky races that you'd seen in Hanna-Barbera earlier. Shaggy also drives a car that seems to be able to do just about anything imaginable. Where he got it is left a mystery. Oh, there's the mystery. Though it's shown later that he's apparently a magically talented mechanic. None of these traits have ever been present in any previous or subsequent movie or TV series. The introduction of real monsters that come in many of the classical forms is also a departure from the norm. Dracula wanting to replace a monster from his realm could have been an interesting concept, but his reasons are just weird. He's conducting an automobile race and can't give out the Monster of the Year trophy without a werewolf. For reasons. The whole plot is a little bit of a stretch, even for a child. So the story will get a 4 out of 10 for being below average. I watched this movie quite a few times as a kid, but that's mostly because I was a fan of classic monsters, not so much because of the movie itself. Small children will still enjoy it, but I'm not sure that it really warrants a second watch. So it'll get a 4 out of 10 for having below average rewatchability. I know it seems like I've been harping on this movie quite a bit, but that's really because I try to look at all these movie reviews with an unbiased perspective. The truth is, I really enjoy it, and I remember being more familiar as a kid with this movie in particular than I was with Scooby Doo's franchise as a whole. Again, a lot more of this has to do with the shenanigans that the classic monsters are getting to over the story itself, or the fact that it's a Scooby Doo property. Compared to other animated films at the time, there's still certainly others I would have gone to first, but this one is still a fun watch. So for my opinion, it can still get a 5 out of 10 for being an average watch. That'll bring the final score to a 4.57 out of 10, making it below average, but on its way to average. As Scooby-Doo movies go, it's probably subpar, but as animated movies go, it's not bad. Thanks everyone for checking out that obscure movie review. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you can be up to date on our latest content. Make sure to check out some of the other content on the channel as well. And if you have any recommendations for obscure movies that we should do a review on, don't hesitate to let us know in the comments below.